We're here with Dan Schilling. First off, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and your 30 years of service to our country.
Well, thanks, Alan. I'm happy to be here, man. I think it's a great podcast, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I know you're an author of a book, and you also spent 30 years as a combat controller. You want to walk us through what intrigued you to join the military, what route you took?
That's an easy one. The girl I was dating at the time reached into my chest, grabbed my heart, and wrenched it out and destroyed me. And I was like, looking for something else to do. And I met a recruiter who told me, we'll pay you to jump out of airplanes. And that had never occurred to me in my life to jump out of an airplane. And I thought, I'm in. So I started my career as an infantry grunt paratrooper, which I enjoyed. I like, humping a rock and humping a 60. And that was where I got my start. And I went on a TDY with some Air Force combat controllers who I'd never heard of. And they were doing some really wazoo stuff. And the guy who got me into combat control, his name is Pete Neal. He's dead now, but he's like, yeah, we're Halo and we're Scuba. And I was like, man. He's like, and we get pro pay. And I said, pro pay? What is pro pay? And his response was, that's cool guy pay. And I went, I'm in. I want cool guy pay. Absolutely. And so I worked my way into combat control and then, spent a number of years, another 3 decades in total in the military. And I enjoyed most of it, not all, but a lot of it.
That's awesome. I got to ask, because I honestly don't know. And I was a grunt myself. I was infantryman with 3rd ID, but I didn't really deal with a lot of combat controllers. What do they honestly do in the battlefield? Because I'm sure a lot of civilians don't know. I mean, even as a grunt, I really don't know. We had support over in Iraq. I really don't know the intel of it. If you could describe a little bit of it. Sure.
It's funny. It's one of the reasons. So I've got a book that comes out in a couple of weeks that I'll be going on book tour with, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But my last book was called Alone at Dawn, and it's really about combat control, which is the Air Force's version of ground special ops, and also the Air Force's first Medal of Honor in half a century, which is John Chapman, who was a combat controller as well. So that's my last book, and I encourage listeners to check it out. It was New York Times bestseller, so we're happy I'm happy that the book did well. But it's going to be a really big budget film starring Jake Gyllenhaal here pretty soon. But the essence of what your question is really combat controllers are really the world's foremost experts in applying air power to a pinpoint location and time on the planet. They choreograph that 4-dimensional space to provide air power where it's needed under the most dire circumstances, and they do it better than anybody in the world. A lot of people can call in airstrikes. Nobody can do it like these guys. And, we spend so much time honing those skills, but it really starts, as you can appreciate this, Alan, it starts with the fundamentals. As a grunt, you learn how to break down that M16, M4, and, what you're going to do with that weapon. So for the similar, a parallel with combat control is, they're actually air traffic controllers. They're certified Air Force air traffic controllers. And sometimes we send guys off to civilian airports to get rated in a tower just to make those skills so, so much, they're so defining to be able to control aircraft, 30 aircraft at a time. You got to be an air traffic controller. But we jump, we dive, we shoot, we blow stuff up, all those sorts of the resident things you see and you think about in special ops. All those skills are part of our training pipeline because the combat controller, it's referred to as combat control teams, or CCT is the acronym, but really we deploy as individuals. And you'll be working with SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, Aussie SAS, Norwegian Kriegsmarines. You end up working with everybody, and you always are out there in the battlefield on your own. And it's a lonely existence when you leave your team and you have to incorporate into somebody else's culture. It's pretty challenging.
Oh, I can only imagine. It seems pretty stressful. I would think.
It is, because the Air Force promotes very slowly, and so often the result is, if I integrate with a Special Forces ODA, I'm probably the lowest ranking guy there, regardless of what everybody's age is. And the burden you carry is really absolute, because we're in a big gunfight. It goes sideways. We need air power. And if I bring in A-10s or F-16s moving fast, whatever it is that I do to resolve the problem, and you save everyone's life, it's a team victory. Everyone's like, oh, yay, team, man, we solved this problem. You know what happens if you do an errant bomb, even one, anywhere? They hang you alone. The team doesn't hang, you hang as an individual, and that's what happens. And it's a significant burden, and it's a significant stress, and it's why we emphasize the things that we do in training.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, didn't combat controllers drop the bomb that killed the two sons of Saddam?
Yeah, and it's a funny, that's a great example, because in the public, in the press, and also by the unit that executed that mission, which was Delta Force, they're like, yep, Delta Force went out and killed Uday and Kisei Hussein, two guys who deserved to die horrible deaths, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that's not who killed them. It wasn't Delta Force. It's a guy named Mike, and he's an Air Force combat controller, and he was an E5 at the time, lowest ranking guy there. And he's the guy who had the ability to put those bombs in a window from a plane moving 540 knots while they're engaged in enemy combat, and smoked both of those guys and turned them into a crater without destroying the neighborhood and without hurting any friendlies. It's an amazing skill, and I've always felt pretty humbled and honored to have been one of those guys, because I know so many that are much better at it than I am. But that's a great example.
Yeah. And what's crazy, you see them pictures of those guys, and was it a shock that killed them? Or because I've seen pictures of the two brothers, and it doesn't look like they sustained a lot of damage. You know what I mean? A lot of
it's not fragmentation. When you get into the real, and this is again, it's an interesting question, because I don't really get these questions from people very often. So you've clearly done a lot of homework. The way you kill guys like that, if you're trying to not destroy the structure, and you don't want collateral damage, and you don't want to hurt the civilians in the building next door to Uday and Kisei Hussein, you put a bomb in a window, small diameter bomb, 200 pounder, it's actually less than that. I forget, because it's been a long time for me. But it's the compression wave that hits them. It's the over pressurization that turns them into jelly. So it kills the bad guys, but it leaves the structure standing. And there's a lot of science involved in that, and the ability to take that knowledge and apply it in the battlefield in the heat of battle without making mistakes. You have to know what the effects of those bombs are, what kind of angle you're looking for, what planes can carry what everybody's call signs are, what are the limitations of Allied and U.S. aircraft. Like it is a whole skill, and it's why these guys live and breathe and die by this trade that separates them from the rest of special ops.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, what kind of training do you actually go through? Is it sort of like a special forces training combined with all the rest of the high spec ops communities?
Yeah, it's the same, because here's the thing. If I'm going to integrate with a SEAL platoon, I have to do everything a SEAL does. And I always say, SEALs are like us. We're just smarter and better looking. And so, in all seriousness, it's the same thing that happens if you get to the pinnacle of our community and you find yourself integrated with SEAL Team 6, which is the Navy's, premier special ops unit, or Delta Force, which is the Army's premier special ops unit. You have to do what those other guys do, and you can't be the weak link. How could you be? You're an individual. You show up and you can't do it, you're out. You can't do the job. So you've got to do what everybody else does. On top of that, you have to carry your own burden. And by the way, our guys carry more weight than anybody else on the battlefield. So if I'm with SEALs, I'm carrying more weight than a SEAL. So we really emphasize that in our training pipeline. And as a result, our training pipeline to produce an initial combat controller is the longest, equally demanding physically, but most intellectually challenging pipeline for special ops in the world. And people have no idea that these guys exist in the Air Force. And so that was my mission with my last book. My purpose was, was to share with the American public in particular, not the military reader, but the average American, the story of combat control. And I'm lucky enough now that we're making a movie, and I'm part of that project because that'll reach more people, and that's my purpose with that book. My new book, my goal is to save lives.
Yeah, if you want to talk about your books, I can't wait to get them and read them. I'd love for the audience to know, that way they can go and purchase your books. I actually put your link, your description, and your link on my Facebook for people to, when they click that link, it goes to your website to be able to purchase your book and read about you. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, for listeners, if you go to danschillingbooks.com, it's just all one word. There's a C in my last name, but it doesn't matter. If you type that in, you'll get to the right spot. You'll see the book that Alan and I were just talking about, which is Alone at Dawn. And it's really about Air Force combat control, which, by the way, predates SEALs and Green Berets. We've been around longer. But my new book, and you find it on the same website, it's called The Power of Awareness. And really, this is drawn from my 30 years in special ops. You know, the latter parts of my career, a lot of my career was at JSOC. That's the Joint Special Operations Command. That's really the black end of special ops. But my final decade was with a lot of the interagency folks, NSA, NNSA, NJIA, CIA, FBI, a lot of those organizations. And so when I decided to write a book on basically how not to be a victim, using the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we use in clandestine work, kind of like, you know, working with the CIA or in regular special ops, I really realized that what would be most valuable would be to pull from all these other experts that are out there. So I have a lot of friends that are case officers for the CIA, counter-terrorist experts at FBI, even folks, regular police detectives. I reached out and spent a lot of time with the LAPD and some detectives there to pull a lot of, you know, that corporate knowledge from this broad body of people, to then distill that into a book that was easy for folks to understand and remember and then implement. And it's really 6 rules, but it's drawn from all these experts, not just myself. And my hope is that it'll help people avoid becoming a victim of criminals, because it's not about Krav Maga or concealed carry. Those are tools. Those are tools that you need to combat something that's happening. And that's not the best strategy. The best strategy, if you're a student of Sun Tzu or a number of other martial philosophers, is avoid a fight you don't have to fight. Don't get yourself into a situation where you have to confront somebody. And that's what my book's about. And I really encourage people to pick up a copy or several if they're for people you love, folks who travel a lot. That's what this book is really tailored toward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Everybody should learn them tactics, because it'll save your life, especially if you're traveling overseas. I know a lot of people go overseas to countries that, like the Philippines, at any point. I mean, there's a lot of places that are good. I've been there myself, but there's a lot of parts of that country where it's predominantly Muslim, and they'll capture you. You know what I mean?
Well, MILF is an unfortunately named acronym for the Moral Islamic Front. But the bottom line is, yeah, there are places you can't go in the Philippines. And I love the Philippines. And you know, I've got friends that are Filipino, and, you know, folks who speak Tagalog, and I really enjoyed the PI. But that's a really great example of, if I'm coming from the States and I'm going to Manila, or I'm going out to Cebu or someplace out in one of the other islands, you know, one, I stand out. As an American, you're going to stand out, regardless of your race. You could be black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. When you come from America, you stand out. And you're in the wrong time zone, so your circadian rhythm's off. You know, people are looking at you. You're not familiar with your surroundings. This is why you're more likely to be the victim of a crime when you're traveling, because you are easier to identify. And criminals are looking for, you know, things that they can exploit. And those are really common exploitations. So if you can really start to tap into, and this is the core of my book, having situational awareness and then honing your intuition and listening to your intuition, which is key. Most people override their intuition all the time, and professionals are worse than anybody when it comes to that. but you do that to your own detriment. And this is really what the book is about. It's like how to tap into that. And I provide exercises in the book so people can actually, rather than just talk about what it is, they can start to practice and learn. And when I say practice, I mean practice, practice, practice. That's how you get good at something. And also the exercises that are part of my book, which is called The Power of Awareness, which is why I guess I emphasize that so much. They're available for free on my website. You know, you have to buy the book, obviously, but if you're out and about in the world and you read the book and you're trying to remember some of the things I was talking about, I want those things to be available to people 24 hours a day, wherever they are. So if you're at a bar having a beer with your buddy and you're like, hey, what was he talking about? When you're walking a street and you're using window reflections to sort of see who's behind you, you can pull that up on your phone, talk about it over a beer, and hopefully be safer. And that's my purpose with this book.
That's awesome. I wish I'd had that copy in 2004. I found myself in Mindanao and Zamboanga when it was the hiatus of Abu Sayyaf.
Oh yeah, 2004.
Man, it was I was being followed, but somehow I got myself out of the situation. Thank God, because I was the only American in sight. And like you said, you do stand out like a sore thumb. And it was a stressful situation, but my military experience taught me to calm down, assess the situation, and get myself out of it before something bad happened.
Well, that's one of the reasons I think the value of the book is it's not written in military speak, and I didn't really write it for the military person because, you know, you had, you know, Alan, when you're out there, you know, and you said you were in Mindanao, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you've got some background that helps you, you know, like you said, stay calm, think through, make a decision, make a plan. And that's all part of the book too. But most people don't have access to that kind of stuff. And at this time in American history, fewer people have served in the U.S. military as a percentage of the population than at any time in our history. And so this is my way of trying to bring that knowledge forward and get it out to people because it is really valuable. And then you incorporate, you know, some of the other great experts in the world, like the CIA. We have the best case officers in the world. And to draw from that, you know, doesn't cost much to get a book, and you can flip through this book and find value in most pages from a lot of these people.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go get that book. I'm getting it myself. I know a lot of listeners would want to tap into the CIA stuff and all that, which we can't. That stuff we can't talk about, and I know that. But I know I'll get asked, so I'm going ahead and put that out. It's classified stuff, so we're not even going to tap into that.
Well, no, but the great thing is not all of it. Like so I talk about surveillance detection and running surveillance detection routes, and SDRs are a pretty basic to very high expertise type activity. And, you know, if you're a CIA case officer and you need a 10-second gap between when you're being tailed by foreign intelligence service so you can make a drop or mark for, you know, schedule a meeting or some other really clandestine thing, that's different than I'm a civilian walking the street and I just need to know if 3 guys are following me and how long they've been following me and, you know, where I think I can go from there. And, you know, that kind of surveillance detection is rudimentary and it's not classified. It's good situational awareness. So that's in the book. People will learn some really cool, you know, CIA tactics that aren't classified. And then you can sling around terms like SDR and impress your friends and maybe, you know, meet other people.
Yeah, absolutely. What does SDR mean?
Surveillance detection room.
Got you. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit, and I know this is, and I don't want to bring up anything that's going to haunt you, or, you know, I know the things of battle kind of rehash stuff, but, you know, the one I'm going to ask is the Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
And I know I'm having Tom Satterley on. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. He was in the unit. I know he don't like to tap into a lot of that, and I don't know if you're the same way. I was kind of wanting to see your perspective on how all that unfolded and your role and what you did during the.
So happy to talk about it. I think it's important to talk about it. It's one I wrote, you know, a couple books ago that I've written was basically it's a handful of guys who are in Somalia for Operation Gothic Serpent, but everybody who's listening would know as Black Hawk Down. They're the same mission. That was just the real name, Gothic Serpent. So we put together a handful of guys to sort of express firsthand accounts of, hey, this is what I did and this is how I experienced that operation, because that operation it's nearly 29 years ago, and it still resonates with people, and there's value in that. So I think for that reason alone, it's important to talk about it. And I'm not really super interested in talking about, what I did or didn't do. I mean, I did some things well, I did some other things not well. I made mistakes. I saved a couple of guys' lives. I mean, so it worked in a lot of ways. My experience was okay, but I think what matters is if you talk about these kinds of missions, people have a better appreciation of what high-end special operations is capable of. So most people, and this is where I'm going with this, in the press, it was this travesty. 18 Americans died, and Clinton pulled us out because he had no spine, which I think is true. He had no spine, and he did pull us out, and he shouldn't have. But the bottom line is it was some sort of a train wreck, and that's not true. Our mission that day was to go out and roll up a bunch of guys from the Somali National Alliance in the middle of the day in a city populated by 1 million people, most of whom who were armed and had been fighting a civil war at that point for over 2 years. You couldn't put 200 guys, which is about what we had on the street, from any other country and any other force in that situation and even have one guy walk out alive. And not only did we walk out alive, we accomplished the mission. We got the guys we were after. The price was very high for us. We lost 3 helicopters, some vehicles, and 18 great Americans. So that's a really heavy price to pay. And that's why I think the burden on Clinton is permanent. But the fact is, man, we could do that because we have the greatest force in the world. And I think that's why it's such a powerful story, because we pulled it off. Man, we killed anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 Somalis in this gunfight. That's a really one-sided gunfight when you look at that. 10-1 is not how in a straight-up street fight you can really come out on top. That's a testament to America's prowess. And the guys from the Ranger Battalion, the TF-160 pilots, the Delta Force guys that were really, it was a Delta Force-led mission, the handful of combat controllers, which is what I was. I was a combat controller at the time. And, these are the best people in the world. And they still are.
Oh, I agree. Now, you talk about, I know you don't like, a lot of you guys don't like the being put on the pedestal for saving guys. 'Cause I know you saved a SEAL and a Army Ranger, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Man, I was just doing my job. The SEAL was a buddy of mine, and he got shot, and he was down the street. And you can appreciate this. He's halfway between me and the bad guys, and he's on the ground, and I can definitely see he's bleeding. What are you going to do? It's not even a choice. Yeah, I had to run down and get him, and I got him and dragged him back. And then this guy Bob, who's a Delta Force medic, was a buddy of mine at the time. This really great guy. He took over from there, and man, that was my part. And the NCOIC of the Ranger Convoy, another really great American and legendary Ranger. He went on to get a Silver Star later in Iraq. His name was Gallagher. Man, he got shot, and he had arterial bleeding, and that's bad. And I patched him up, and he survived, and I'm really glad I did, because he went on to do even greater things. And he was just a great man and a great leader. And I just did my part, man. Nothing special amazing for me.
No, it's cool. And I know a lot of guys don't like the hoorah around it, but you saved 2 guys' lives, and that's 2 families that are coming home to loved ones, and that means a ton. Just the average person that has never been in the military could never understand being under fire and trying to save your battle buddy. It's something that you can't even put into words what it's like, because until you're in that situation, it's bliss. You know what I mean?
It is a difficult thing to express, and I've put it the best way I can in a couple of my books, just by virtue of having been in that situation. But at the end of the day, I think the difference between that and what other people experience in a moment of heroics, which to me, I define hero in my book as the necessity of action. Like that's, to me, that's really it. Heroes are people. They're not some superhuman people way up on a pedestal and they're above us, because I don't think I'm above anybody. But I practiced and trained for that, certainly, because we all did. But the fact is, a hero is somebody who does what they know they just have to do. They may not even want to do it. They could be scared shitless, literally using that word, and they still will do it to save somebody else. And I think that's one of the greatest attributes to humanity, is that we will sacrifice ourselves voluntarily for somebody else that we love or care for. And to me, battle is a lot about love. Like, you have a lot of love for the brothers you fight with. And it's, you know, people shy away from that. They like to use brotherhood or some other really manly words. Man, for me, it's love. Like, I love those guys. I will sacrifice, if I have to, my life for those guys, because I love them that much. And it transcends family. That's where I think the disconnect to civilians comes in, where they have a hard time understanding, well, how can those people be more important than your family? But the necessity to act, man, you see mothers running into burning houses with no training whatsoever, but she'll do anything to save her child because she has to.
Yeah, that's a great look at. I've never put it in that perspective. And a lot of people, one of my best friends, we've been running together for 18 years now. And every day I talk to him, I tell him I love him. And I've seen people that heard the conversation look at me like, why are you telling another man you love him? I'm like, you don't understand. He is my brother. He is my kids call him Uncle Adam. He is, I mean, we've been through hell and back, and
Yep.
they understand, you know, he understands me. I understand. I know what he's going to do the next step he takes. You know what I mean? I know him better than half my family. I've done so much with the guy. In fact, one of the times to the Philippines, he was with me. Great guy. He's going to be on a podcast in November. But that's a great point, that what you said, a mother would run into a blazing house, and I never put it in that kind of context. That's the love you have for somebody, and that's why it is our brothers in arms. You know what I mean? It's a bond that people will never understand unless you've been through that bond together, you know?
And I think it's okay that they don't understand that, because you don't have to have done the kinds of things that we've done to be a good person or be a good American or be courageous. It's at the very far end of a spectrum that in a lot of ways you don't actually want to wish on other people anyway. So, you know, I don't really wish my experiences on other people. But the upside, as you and I were just talking, is you know, like you said, your buddy that you've been running with for a long time, you know, the most extreme combat I've been in, which is one of the biggest gunfights in the last half century. Like my best friend in that gunfight, well, two of my best brothers, you know, one has since killed himself, but he grew up, or my son grew up with him being, he was with us like Christmas morning. Like, Pat came and spent Christmas with us when he was an operator and we were on the same team at JSOC. I think that's how close it is. Like, he was just part of my family, and I miss him every day.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that, man. I can't grasp around. Thank God I've never had the notions in my mind. I can't even grasp it. Honestly, I've had some battle buddies take their lives, and it's hard to deal with. It's a nightmare, you know, and I'm glad I don't have them side effects. I mean, I deal with PTSD the way I do, but I got my family, and them guys got family too, but the 22 a day it's kind of I want to call it a pandemic, really. If 22 guys a day for a year, 10 years, it's an astronomical amount of people, and something more has to be done for these guys.
Well, we struggle because there's, you know, at the community I came from has more combat experience than any generation of Americans ever, including World War II veterans. Like the guys who have 20 plus deployments doing the stuff that we do. And it leads to, there's a combat addiction that goes along with that, outside of just the normal, I'm having a hard time reintegrating with my family. Because for a lot of guys, when we're gone all the time, reality is deployment. Home is the fake world. And so when you lose that what you've come to understand is how my life is, which I deploy and I have the normal rhythms. And you're not in a gunfight every day, but you're doing stuff, and a lot of it's high risk. Man, it makes it very, very hard to come back. And I think it's one of those things that's untalked about, this combat addiction. And it's what I worry about for my community, because combat controllers, man, you bounce from organization to organization. So if I'm with SEAL Team X, whatever it is, and I come back and they're into their rotation cycle, their normal jorts of training and preparation and deployment, my guys are double banging. And so we end up with more combat experience than most of the other special operations communities. And I've had 7 good friends who were combat controllers that have killed themselves. And there's way more than that. But I don't know how. All you can do is reach out. And I think this is why it's important to say you love people, because it helps break down barriers. It's better than just saying, oh, you're my brother. You tell somebody you love them as a human, that causes a reaction that is fundamental, and it's part of your fabric, and it's more meaningful than just, hey, we're battle buddies.
I agree. I got 2 buddies right now going through that, and I've every day I text them, tell them I'm thinking about them, and I do love them. We deployed to Iraq together, and they're in a dark place, but they text back every day, and thank God, I'm trying everything I can to keep them alive and keep them here. They got some demons they're dealing with, and God bless them, and trying to do my part to keep them around. So,
well, it's good on you, and you have to do that. But in the end, you can't save everyone either, man. I have my own demons for a lot of reasons, and my way of dealing with it was base jumping instead of the bottom of a bourbon or pill bottle. Man, I go out and jump off cliffs and buildings in Las Vegas.
So that's what I was just about to get to. I wanted to get into your base jump. What intrigued you to start doing that? And have you ever? I've never done it, and I don't think I could do it, to be honest with you. Have you ever got up to jump off and been like, oh, I don't know about this one? Or is it just that thrill-seeking adventure for you?
Well, it's not. It's a way of pushing certain boundaries and pushing yourself, because base jumping, which is for people who might not know what it is. Base jumping is basically skydiving without an airplane. It's basically putting a parachute on your back and jumping off of either a building, an antenna, a bridge or span, or the earth. That's why it's actually an acronym. BASE stands for those 4 elements. And so it concentrates a lot of focus, because it's the only sport I've ever done that you have to do everything right, exactly right, at exactly the right time, every single time, without exception, or you die. So there's it's a high consequence activity, as opposed to like skydiving, where, skydiving for me is a little boring. I don't even skydive anymore, and I skydived for decades. But there's a certain amount of Zen-like peace that happens, for at least for me. I can't speak for other base jumpers, but I know some men and women feel this way. When I push off of that rock and it's 400 feet or 600 feet off the ground, there is a moment of clarity that happens before I'm accelerating at 32 feet per second, where you're suspended in the world, and it is quiet. I'm very focused on what I'm doing, but there's no thoughts in my head. And I find that very, very appealing, and that helps me with a lot of demons. Now, I've almost died base jumping a number of times. I should be dead. So, I don't base jump too much anymore. But really, what you're talking about is, have I had moments when I thought I shouldn't jump? And the answer is yeah. And I talk about that in my new book, The Power of Awareness. It comes out June 2nd. I talk about listening to your intuition. And I've had times where I've said to other people I'm with, I'm not jumping this. I'm off, or there's something off. We're playing spot the gust, which is like you're trying to jump between gusts. That's a bit of Russian roulette too. And I'll walk down, and it's like, well, what happens when you walk down? The answer is nothing. But it still means you listen to your intuition, and it's very important to do that. Now, base jumping is scary anytime. Don't get me wrong. There's very few base jumps I've been on where I wasn't anxious to some degree.
Have you ever tried that wingsuit, whatever it's called? God, I
Yeah,
can't think of it.
wingsuit flying. No, I don't do wingsuit proximity flight with base jumping because you have to do that all the time. And like I'm a middle-aged dude, man. I even got white hair, and so just to go out base jumping is good enough for me. And I don't have the skills or the time available to do that because I'm a full-time author. But what I do instead, I go speed flying, which is basically a small, like a paraglider canopy is what it looks like. It's a parachute, and I'll ski to the top of one of the mountains here around my house, and then I'll lay out my wing, snap into my harness, and I'll just ski down. The next thing you know, you're skiing and flying both at the same time. I really like that. That's a really good activity for me.
That's incredible. Now, you said a Guinness World Book of Record, right? Of
Yeah, I have the most base jumps in 24 hours. I did 201 base jumps in one day.
So in an hour, how many did you have to do?
When I was really hitting stride, I was doing one every 5 minutes, but my average was like 6 minutes and 10 seconds between jumps. And I did this at the Snake River Gorge in Twin Falls, Idaho. There's a bridge there called the Prime Bridge. It's really popular with base jumpers, and it's a little under 500 feet. It's 486 feet, 483 feet, depending on what level the river is. And that was, where I set my world record. I had a few hundred base jumps off that bridge anyway, but what I used was a construction crane to haul me up. And I had 24 parachutes and about a dozen parachute packers that were base jumpers that kept me in parachutes because I was burning through chutes pretty fast.
And you didn't get nervous someone else packing your chute?
No, some of the best base jumpers in the world converged to help me break the world record. It was a charity event for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, and we provide college educations for kids who have lost a parent in special ops. So I felt very strongly about that because I could have been one of those guys. And so people really converged. And no, I mean, when I first started jumping, I was burning rigs faster than my packing crew could keep up. So I got a couple of sloppy pack jobs, and they almost killed me in the first 3 hours. So we took a 5-minute break and we reset, and then things sort of smoothed out from there. But no, I was really comfortable with these people packing rigs. And actually, my biggest fear setting the world record was I would get so comfortable that I might make a mistake because I'm jumping every 5-6 minutes, and I'm very comfortable base jumping off this bridge. So I would do things to try and mitigate the risk to myself. For instance, rather than put my pilot chute in the bottom of my pack, I would go handheld, because if I reach back and I'm tired and I'm not paying attention because I've been jumping for 20 hours or whatever, and I pull out my pilot chute, but I don't unseat it all the way, I run out of elevation and pretty quick. And by the time I realize I don't have a pilot chute in the airstream, it's too late and I might kill myself. And I didn't want to die on my own charity event, because then it becomes not about the kids. It becomes, oh, tragedy at bridge. And it was really about these kids and raising money. And we raised, I wanted to raise 100,000. I fell short. I think we raised like 60,000 bucks or something. But it was a great event. Like, everybody had a good time and nobody got killed. I mean, I broke my arm 8 hours in, but outside of that, like, it was pretty benign.
Wow. Great charity. Anything for kids any family member that's lost a loved one overseas in a accident. Now you so you got 3 books, correct?
Yeah, I've published 3. I've written more, but I've only published 3 books.
Yeah. I'm going to put that website on this podcast. That way you people can go to this as well and purchase your book. And I truly hope everybody that listens buys them books, because I am, and I can't wait to read them. A couple questions I was going to ask you. What makes you tick?
I like doing things that I find difficult or that intimidate me. So, I was an action guy for 30 years, thousands of halo jumps and, closed circuit diving and throwing motorcycles out of planes and all that kind of, blowing stuff up. It's all great, shooting guns. and I could do that for a long time. And it was, parachutes, obviously I like parachutes, but, but those were things that were challenging for me at the time. And when I was younger, and now, I really want to be an A-list writer of stories that have an impact on people. Like the purpose of the book Alone at Dawn about combat control was to change the public's view of the entire Air Force, not just about about combat control. And with this book, I want to save lives. I think this book can save lives, and I want it to be entertaining too. So the book is not a complex read. The science isn't overwhelming. It's very practical, but there's some great stories in there. And so for me, that's really intimidating because I was never a writer. I didn't grow up. I wasn't one of those kids. I was like most dudes who find their way into special ops. I was really hyperactive. I didn't even want to stay in school, so I was not a writer. Now it's like that's just my purpose in life is to write stories that impact people in a positive way, and that's really intimidating for me because I'm a little insecure about writing. Now I call myself a writer, and I am, but there's always that little kid inside of you who's like, people are going to figure out that I should just go back to hunting people down or dropping bombs on them or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know we're slotted for 45 minutes, and we've been on here 41, so I won't take up no more of your time. I think it's been a great podcast. I didn't want to go too in depth with, stuff that we really don't need to. People can read the book, and that's where they need to find most of the stuff. I just want to hit key topics. But once I end the broadcast, I want to keep you on for just a second. I want to ask you a couple questions.
Happy to do it, Alan. Happy. And listen, I appreciate you putting this stuff out. For me, everything that I'm doing now in my life is designed to be additive to other people. It's part of my way of earning back part of my soul and giving back to the larger world. So I appreciate your support, and for everybody listening, thanks for listening. And I hope they visit the website. I hope you find a good book. There's some videos on my world records on there, some stuff like that. But I hope people find a good book on that page, and I hope it has an impact on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on, and I'm going to end this, and then I'll ask you them questions real quick. Thanks again.